in order to understand what this is not about whether or not it's better to eat meat or be a vegetarian. This deals with let's provide a scenario here. Pretend that I have a person over to my house for dinner, and I know that they struggle with alcoholism. And if you know how alcoholism works, usually a person can't have just one or two drinks. Once they get started, man, they're going to the end, and that end is hairy and nasty, and they hate themselves the next day, and they feel miserable. They might make decisions that they really regret. So pretend that I have a person over that struggled with this, but I don't struggle with alcohol. And we sit down to dinner, and I have a beer, and I just set a beer right in front of them and say, "Welcome to my household. Good to have you." Is that a loving thing to do? Because I will cause them to stumble, right? They've got a little button, they got a little switch that gets flipped on in their head, and even though I'm trying to show them love, what I'm actually doing is I'm tripping them up and causing them to start on this path that has a miserable ending. Now, likewise, that's what sin is like. Sin is an addiction that ends with a terrible ending for everybody. We're all addicted to it. And the question is, our relationships with one another in the church, should we be showing off how strong we are in the faith and how we can resist temptation in some situations, or should we be steering clear of temptation so that others in the church are not tempted by us? So here the context is the Roman Empire. They believed in many multiple gods, thousands of gods. They believed in local gods. They believed in national gods. They believed in gods of the state. And throughout the year, there were different festivals that people would go. In every town, there would be different temples to different gods and goddesses. And they would have parties and barbecues. They would bring sacrifices, like the Jews, to the temple in Jerusalem. And they would sacrifice these animals, and they would have cookouts, and they would all eat meat together because meat is delicious. So this is an agrarian, impoverished society. One would safely assume when a person is eating meat outside publicly that that meat is from an animal that's been sacrificed to another god. Have you followed me this far? I think a lot of people check out right there because it's just too weird. We don't sacrifice meat in our society anymore. And we have meat all the time. We don't make that assumption at all. But in the ancient world, the assumption is if they're eating meat publicly, that meat has been sacrificed to another god. Unless you're in Jerusalem, in which case it's probably been sacrificed to the God of gods, the Lord of lords. But they shared in a similar worldview to what I described earlier, where there are other heavenly principalities and powers, other gods and lords. And you'll see when it quoted verse 5, "For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven and on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is only one God." That's the Christian biblical worldview. It's not there are no other gods. It's there are a lot of heavenly beings, none of whom come close to God. We serve the God of gods, the Lord of lords, who created heaven and earth, is beyond time and space. That's the God we have access to. But there are other gods that people have worshipped and sacrificed to, and indeed today, there's still gods that people worship that are not God, So here you have this practice associated with worship of other gods. And there are some Corinthians who have that knowledge and, there's only one true God and nothing can take me from his hand, so I can eat this meat, no big deal. Doesn't matter what anybody thinks. I know I belong to God. Paul is going, this isn't about you. This is about your brothers and sisters in the church. And when they look at you eating meat, what they're assuming is there is no power in this food, and so they might participate in worship of these other gods and be taken from God's hand. You might be a stumbling block for them. Do you remember what Jesus said about stumbling blocks? Stumbling blocks are sure to come, but woe to the person who causes one of these little ones to stumble. It would be better if a millstone were tied around your neck and you were tossed into the deepest part of the sea. That's how Jesus felt about stumbling blocks. And he's saying there are things, practices that we participate in that when other people in the church see it, they make certain assumptions that may or may not be right. I might not have a certain struggle in my life, but someone else in my church might really struggle with an addiction, with a temptation. And if I'm just flagrantly flaunting how strong I am spiritually out and about, other people, they might fall into sin if they go into a strip club, but I'm Pastor Jeffrey and I'm super special, so I'm going to go to the strip club this Friday and it's not going to be a big deal. No. That's ridiculous. If you want to be a follower of Jesus, you walk in the light. It doesn't matter how strong you think you are. Life is not about showing off how strong you are. Life is about suffering with and for the weak. That's what Jesus did.